My God is strong. He'll do anything big or small. Nothing is impossible for a super wonderful God. Every day I can know God is always there for me and my family. Every day I can know greater is the one who lives inside me. Super big, super strong, super wonderful God. Super big, super strong, super wonderful God.
Hi, welcome to Fantastic Fridays. We're so glad that you could join us. Tonight we're going to be learning about the life of David.
Hello, superheroes! Welcome to Superhero Training. Today, we are going to talk about how superheroes trust God. Our Bible verse comes from Proverbs 3, and it says this: trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Try to say it with me. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Superheroes trust God. We are going to look this week at David. The Bible calls David a man after God's own heart. That means that David loved God and he served God and he wanted to be like God. And this summer in Superhero Training, we are also talking about how we want to be like God's son Jesus. That is what this superhero training is about. It's training for us to be like the greatest superhero ever, Jesus. David was like the Lord in a number of ways. But one of the ways that we want to talk about today was how David trusted God. David trusted God even when he was facing a giant named Goliath. The story of David and Goliath comes from the book of 1 Samuel chapter 17 in the Old Testament of the Bible. David is an Israelite. The Israelites are God's people, and the Philistines are the Israelites' enemy. And Goliath is the Philistines' baddest, meanest, fiercest warrior. The Bible describes Goliath in just this way. Goliath, a Philistine, the champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and as thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with the iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield. Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. "Why are you all coming to fight?" he called. "I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me." When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. So the Israelites are at war against the Philistines, and the Philistines' scariest warrior is Goliath, who was over 9 feet tall. He wore bronze armor, and he had a javelin and a shield bearer. It says the Israelites were terrified and deeply shaken. Understandably, I would have been scared too. Most of us know what it feels like to be afraid, and the Israelites were similar to us in that. We might not ever face an actual giant like Goliath, like the Israelites did. But some of us know what it is like to face a problem that feels like a giant. The Israelites were so scared. Even though they knew they were supposed to fight and face Goliath, they were too afraid. David is still a young boy. He's young enough that he actually wasn't even at the battle. He was still mainly at home tending to his father's sheep, but he was going back and forth, bringing his brothers some lunch and dinner. And when he hears about Goliath, this is what David says. "Don't worry about this Philistine," David told Saul. "I will go fight him." "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You are only a boy, and he has been a man of war since his youth." But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, and when a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I will do it to this Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. David trusted God. He trusted that the Lord who saved him from the lions and the bears would also save him from Goliath. That is big trust. David trusted God to rescue and save. Jesus also trusted God to rescue and to save. David was right to trust God, just like Jesus was, because here's what happens. David picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them in his shepherd's bag. Then, armed with only his shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. Goliath walked out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at this ruddy-faced boy. "Am I a dog?" he roared at David, "that you come at me with only a stick?" David replied to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with the sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give it to us." As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine right in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. David had only a sling and 5 stones. Goliath was a giant, monster-sized warrior with spears and javelins and swords. But David knew something that Goliath didn't. David knew that God was worthy of his trust. And superheroes trust God with all of their heart. They trust him to rescue and save. And that is what God did. God saved David. Jesus also trusted God. The Bible tells us that God sent Jesus to earth to seek and to save the lost. And that's what Jesus did. He came to seek and to save. God's plan was always that Jesus would save us and rescue us, just like the superhero that he is. Jesus trusted God. And as we are learning to be like Jesus, who is the greatest superhero ever, we also should be superheroes who trust in God. Like our Bible verse says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Say it with me one time. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Trust in God, superheroes.
Our God is strong. He'll do anything big or small. Nothing is impossible with the super wonderful God. Every day I can know God is always there for me and my family. Every day I can know greater is the one who lives inside me. Super big, super strong, super wonderful God. Super big, super strong, super wonderful God. Oh, 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 oh. Our God is strong. He'll do anything big or small. Nothing is super big, super strong, super wonderful God. Oh, 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 super big, super strong, super wonderful God. 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 Oh, 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 oh,
Let's do a craft. As we learn about superheroes in the Bible and as we learn to be like Jesus, the best superhero ever, we are making superhero capes. Cut the felt and use the glue to design the best super cape. Every superhero needs a super cape.
Let's do an experiment.
When David trusted God, he still had to be wise. He used a sling and rocks as his weapon, even though most people, including Goliath, would use real armor and swords. David was used to what he knew, and he was comfortable with as he trusted God. That is wisdom. Today in our experiment, we are making little pegboard games. You can paint and decorate yours to be unique. And then once it was dry, you can play the game using wisdom and strategy, just like David did.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Superheroes trust God.
my God is strong. He'll do